Okay, let's talk about low-cost manufacturing. Why do we put the low cost in it? Well, that's really the thrust of manufacturing today, getting your costs under control. Western countries have good standard of living. Trouble is, it costs a hell of a lot of money if you've got to employ people. So, therefore, manufacturing more or less sort of got up and gone to Asia. However, there's a number of things you should be focused on here. We're not going to try and discourage you from doing that, that is, going off to Asia, but you need to be realistic about the reasons why you're doing it and whether you're actually getting the sort of results you need to be getting. I want to go through a few points that usually it will be smart to do before you go rushing off to Asia. Firstly, if you're going to do this and you go through middlemen, which is quite often the case if someone approaches you and, we'll get this done in Shanghai, Lord knows where, and you think, that's the in thing to do, and the next thing you know, you're involved with the middleman who in turn is dealing with someone else on the ground there, who in turn is subbing things out to someone else, who in turn is often subbing it out to someone else yet again. Now, anybody seriously involved in manufacturing knows how damn hard it is to make the same thing, consistent quality all the time, no matter where it is. And it's just so hard often to get the message through to the factory floor of exactly what you want and what's acceptable and what's not. And so, and that's when everyone speaks the same language. Now, when you've got to go through, the more people you've got to go through, the more problems you're going to have. So prior to diving off to the other side of the world, here are a few things that you should be considering. First thing is security. The fact that if you have the whole thing made there and packed there, you really are putting your head in a bit of a noose because you're providing not only the product but all the instructions and packaging and everything else. Which really sort of helps people get on the road if they want to really do you in. Not easy stuff, so it's not a good idea to give them the whole formula. It's usually a good idea to look at what you're doing and pick out the labour-intensive bits of it and get those done there first. But let's run down. People say, of course, there's another issue here that people say, we've patented something in China. Well, mate, let me tell you, if you want to actually defend the case in China, prosecute in China, don't bother. It's too hard. Yes, there's legislation, but enforcing something there is just too hard. Don't even rely on that. It's not worth the bother. Running a case is not simple there, and the chance of getting a decent outcome aren't worth it. So don't be relying on that if you can help it. The things that you need to do prior to this are look through your product costs carefully, look to where the labour is. Then you look to what contributes that labour. You look and be flexible enough to alter your design if necessary, and if you can, and get people involved more or less on the factory floor to see what processes are involved. And sometimes the inverted commas designers and the real world don't sort of meet. They're in different worlds altogether. So you get to the coalface and you find out just what needs, the processes involved that involved in producing something, and the relative costs, and whether you can go about the job a different way, and whether you can just simplify the operation, because the simpler it is, the less things that can go wrong for quality. Whether you look at your raw materials and whether the materials can be swapped. Also, when you're looking at design, you look at the stackability, the nestability of the components. If you're going to make them somewhere else, then you can pack 3 times, and we've done all this, pack 3 or 4 times the amount in a container, and I'm saying we've done it. It makes a hell of a difference the freight cost when you're shipping it from Timbuktu to you. Then above and beyond everything else, you look carefully at your documentation. Have you got a good set of drawings, details on your product, photographs and drawings, showing clearly the sorts of things you want to do, making sure your units are right, simple thing, but people get into strife with that, and clearly defining the issues that are important in the use of this thing. In other words, the key bits that will bring you undone quality and performance wise, to be sure that the people are producing it understand those issues, acceptable finishes and acceptable properties of the end thing. So you've got a good set of plans and photos, etc., that allow somebody who doesn't necessarily speak the language, or tells you they do, but they're handing it on to the person who doesn't, the people generally understand what in the hell you want. Now this makes the whole process just so much simpler. Then be conscious within this that normally, say for the retail product, the price from you to the actual customer usually varies by 3 times. So each dollar you pull off the price means $3 at the customer, and that makes a hell of a difference. And sometimes manufacturing people sort of lose that plot, that the whole system gets magnified. The more hands it moves through, the more margins, and normally if you allow for 3 to 1, it's a pretty good sort of rule of thumb. $1 saved at the beginning of the line is sort of $3 saved the customer. It makes a difference between winning and losing sometimes. So we're conscious of that. Right, also should sort of stick in there the fact I always advise customers never to build the big factory and put the big name on it. The last thing you should really be doing is building a big factory. I mean, if it's an ego trip you need, well, that's fine. But if you really actually want to make money, then don't be getting into building big factories for the sake of it. Maybe build a big warehouse, but that's about it. In terms of again, the outsourcing, and we were talking about Asia, but let's just talk about someone down the road. When you look at the functions in the product that are having to be accomplished, you probably have a series of processes. Some of them you put equipment in and you do yourself, and you ask yourself, well, why in the hell should I be doing that? Because there's actually a guy down the road who actually does nothing but that particular function. And he has a pile of, or it might be she, of equipment that's designed to sort of minimise the labour, automate the thing, and they can do that per part cost far cheaper than you can. So what in the hell have you got this function going on in your factory for? Why bother? Have it done somewhere else. And this can save money without literally getting it way out of your field of view, like at the other side of the world. So examine what local producers, and maybe not that local, but in the same sort of state sort of thing, can do for you, because sometimes a specialist can do that number of jobs quite cheaply. So we've got down that route. We've also thought about the automation in your own plant and the material flow and the raw material purchasing, and looked at ways and means of that. So then you say, right, well, we've really reached the end of the savings here, so then we have to make it in Asia, but we do have our decent documentation on the product, which makes it easier to do the deed. So then you actually start to look for someone. Now, we do this job for people, and we look at certain sorts of companies and try and stack up someone who has really got the goods to do the job. And even then it's a gamble. And we usually advise the client to go visit these people, or 2 or 3 good candidates, to sort of eyeball them and see just exactly what flaws they have. Some people, these days we can get documentation on Lord knows who, but nothing beats actually eyeballing them and seeing whether they're putting up a bit of a front or not. So we've got to this point where we're about to strike a deal, then you need to be reasonably conscious of the sorts of areas, as I mentioned before, isolating out where the real labour is in your process. Now, if we look, say, at a plastic product, and let's say medium complexity, see reasonable size, medium complexity, we've done these sort of surveys where Chinese producers, we're looking at something on average of a large number of companies that are reasonably presentable. We're looking at a quarter of the cost. I mean, it's a hell of a difference. No wonder tooling people in Western countries are having a problem. Hell of a cost difference. But when you come to actually moulding the part, the difference is only about 2/3 the cost. Now, it is probably, and you need also to be conscious of when you're looking at these cost differences, that you're going to have to buy a minimum amounts. And minimum amounts mean that, you know, X number of containers or whatever of the parts, and then you're going to pay for them before they leave that country. So you've got to consider the cost of financing this thing. I'm not trying to discourage people totally here, but just be real about where extra cost gets in. So you're paying for the thing way before you're actually going to sell it, and you've got to factor in the cost of holding that stock. In some cases it won't be an issue. In other cases it'll be the difference between do you just do the tooling there, or do you actually do the parts there or not. Also be aware there's a fair erosion of wage differences in places like China. Wages have gone up considerably, and the differences will move as well. So then you say, okay, well, we can go to India or Vietnam or somewhere else, but yeah, just be aware of this variation. There are parts of China which you'd probably favour a bit more because maybe advances haven't quite caught up with them in wage structures. Be conscious of people who are outsourcing yet again. So even though you might deal and get rid of the normal guy who's trying to organise the deal from your end, nevertheless, when you go to someone, and we've even had it happen in Italy, we discover that the product's really not being made by them, it's being outsourced by some other lot. And this can get very complicated when you start to get into why is this product different than it was supposed to be, and then you've got all that communication and fiddling around trying to get the message through to who actually is doing the job. So I think, and we also talked about organising your act before you go offshore. Manufacturing is always a tricky business. The production people in any place are always under great pressure to produce the same thing all the time. Never an easy job. And but I think the message I'm getting through is approach the thing systematically and with a bit of common sense. Can make a hell of a difference to the sort of outcome you're looking for.